Okay, guys, today I'm going to do a lecture. This is the first part on group influence phenomenon, or phenomena, I should say. I have 6 of them. I redid the review, so I'm going to do the first 3 on this video, and then I'll do another video with the second 3. So here it goes, group influence phenomenon. Let me get my clicker. Okay, destructive obedience is the first one. Destructive obedience is all about just following orders. And sometimes we follow orders so much that it ends up in negative consequences for the rest of the people in society. Now, I usually talk about Nazi Germany here because it's a perfect example of how people followed Adolf Hitler and did these horrible things. But for your project, usually, there's some following orders that go involved with cults or extreme. But Stanley Milgram in 1963 did one of the most famous experiments that's ever been done, and basically he would bring 2 people into the lab. One was actually an actor that was in on it with Stanley, and he always got the role of the learner or the student. And so what the teacher would do, and most of you have already heard about this experiment, would teach the learner a list of word pairs like green grass, blue day, nice girl, or something like this. I got them wrong already. And then if I said green, you should select the right, alternative like grass. So the teacher was instructed to give a shock to the learner for each incorrect response. Now, he doesn't really shock the learner, but he's put into the seat and given a 45-volt shock, the teacher, the real person, and it seems real. Now they cut the electricity off, they put the other person in the seat, so it seems like you're going to shock them. Now, the kicker is the shock machine starts at 15 volts, I don't know if you can see this, and goes all the way to 450. So for each incorrect response, you're supposed to kick it up a notch. They want to see how far will people take it up towards 450 volts. So I have the setup here. Here you are as the teacher. The learner's over here in the next room. You were just in the chair and got shocked. Now you're going to see how far this guy will take it up while the experimenter stands by and watches your behavior. So he's the authority figure. Will you follow his orders to this degree? So I'm fixing to show the movie, and then I'll come back and talk about the results.
What's going to happen, what you're supposed to do. The teacher will read a list of word pairs to you like these.
In Milgram's study, subjects were paid to participate in what they were told was an experiment on the effects of punishment on learning. Subjects were told that they would be the teacher. They were instructed to ask questions of a respondent in an adjoining room. The respondent, or learner, was actually an accomplice in the study. The experimenter stood by to act as an authority figure.
Begin. Blue girl. Nice day.
The subject presented the learner with a set of word pairs that the learner was expected to remember. The learner was then given a stimulus word along with 4 other words.
Green. Grass, hat, ink, apple. Answer, please.
His task was to recall which of those 4 words was originally paired with the stimulus word. The respondent indicated his choice by pushing a button corresponding to one of the 4 words. If the wrong answer was given, the experimenter ordered the subject to administer an electric shock to the learner. The shock started at 15 volts and progressed up to 450 volts, indicated on the control panel as danger, extreme shock.
Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 105 volts.
The respondent, of course, was not actually receiving the shock. To the subject, however, the learner was experiencing more and more pain.
Dance.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me out of here. You have no right to keep me here. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
Continue, please.
Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let
Go
me
on.
out. Let me out.
Responsible for it.
Red.
That is incorrect. This will be at 3:30. The correct phrase is rich
Let me out of
boy.
here. Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me out, I tell you. Let me out of here. Let me out of here. You have no right to hold me
The
here.
next phrase is
The surprising and disturbing results of the Milgram experiment reveal how obedience can take precedence over moral sense. Many subjects initially showed reluctance to administer shock, especially when the learner complained about a heart condition and the increasing level of pain. But in the end, 2/3 of the subjects obeyed authority and administered the highest level of shock, 450 volts.
The answer is duck. 435 volts. It says danger, severe shock here. Next X on the next one.
Continue, please.
435 volts. Next one, brave. Woman, soldier, dog, horse.
These subjects were ordinary, well-intentioned people. Conformity and obedience are obviously powerful forces.
Okay, so here I am back again. I have the results from the study. What I thought would happen is this orange line. Let me get it on here. That people would drop out real fast as soon as the guy started screaming. Let me see if I can draw on here, right here. This part right here. But really people stayed in for a long time. And even right here, 65% of the people took it all the way up to 450 volts. Now this really disturbed people, so they wanted to know why would people do this. They replicated it with a number of different kinds of people. And so these why questions, if you remember, well, maybe in this class I'll get into a couple of different details about it. I thought I was talking to my intro class for a minute. So in weak situations, this is what I talk about in my intro class. Snyder and Ickes talk about this, that you have a few rules for your behavior. So if you're mean, you can be mean. If you're nice, you can be nice. If you're outgoing, you can be outgoing, whatever. If you're at the coffee shop, there's not a lot of rules for your behavior. In stronger situations, there becomes more rules for your behavior, and so it kind of overwhelms your personality. Now, this isn't the best example, but if everybody goes into church and is quiet, that doesn't mean everybody's shy. That's because the situation demands you to be quiet. Now, some situations are so strong, and I think I have like Jigsaw on here, you know what I mean? I don't know if you know the Saw series, that everybody acts kind of in a Luciferic way, and this is what Philip Zimbardo calls the Luciferic Principle. And he came to, I think, Mesa Community College, and he talked about this, that in wartime situations, people do horrendous things, not because they're evil people, because the situation demands evil acts. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Stanley Milgram kind of echoes this sentiment. He says good people were seen to knuckle under. Okay, so authoritarian personality is one thing you should know for your project. These people are rule followers. I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but anyway, they like to follow rules a lot. Not that they like to boss people around a lot. They love to fall in line. So I always say if you're going to be in the military, you better have an authoritarian personality. Otherwise, you're not going to take orders and do what you're told. And so a lot of times people have argued that, maybe the German people or these people in Nazi Germany had, this tendency to follow orders, and that's why they just do what they're told, and they don't think about the consequences because they have an out. It wasn't me, it was that dude telling me. That's what happened in the Nuremberg. I was just following orders, but look at these guys. I mean, that's not just following orders. You kind of like. And so these people that do these horrendous things during wartime, like Adolf Eichmann, the Minister of Death, the Nazi, experimentation on Jews, Lieutenant William McCallie that, went through My Lai and massacred 300 people during the Vietnam War. Even during war, you can't use it as a cop-out that the strength of the situation was just too big. Hopefully that makes sense for this first one. I think I have one other explanation or two about this. One is dissonance reduction. It's like I don't want to hurt nice people, but I'm hurting nice people. Let's say I work in Auschwitz. It's like, well, some of these people are nice that I'm having to hurt. Well, then what I do is I dehumanize them. And so they're not people. They're less than human. And you see this within the Nazi propaganda efforts by Goebbels and other people, that they dehumanize the Jews because that way you're not hurting people. You're hurting animals, which is like really sick, but this is the way they look at it. The other thing, too, is self-perception theory. Once I've hurt people over a period of time, I must be a sadistic person. And so I have to change my opinion about myself. And they found this with slave owners. Early on, they were being nice to some of the slave owners. Not all of them would be nice to the slaves. But then eventually, it's like they had to engage in these acts. It's like, I guess I'm this kind of a person that dominates other human beings. Okay, so the second thing I'm going to talk about is group think, oh, I forgot I had the Donner Party on here. I have all this information. You don't have to know any of this, but the Donner Party was going to take this shortcut. It's going to save them 300 miles. And everybody goes, yeah, yeah, let's take it. And so they all like decided as a group to take it. And then eventually, they all basically died and they had to cannibalize one another and this, that, and the other. And it ended up in a fiasco. So Irving Janis talks about a lot of different fiascos throughout history where groups, he brought this term out of George Orwell's 1984, are so concerned with reaching an agreement, a consensus. It's like, where are we going to go eat? That everybody goes somewhere. It's like, well, I didn't want to go to Sweet Tomatoes. Neither did I. It's like, well, I guess everybody wanted to go there, but nobody did. Because as a group, you're more concerned with just agreement than making it a good decision. Okay, so he wrote this book in and so one of the things he says is that they try to minimize groups' conflict. So they suppress, a thorough evaluation, let's say, of restaurants to go eat at. It's like, okay, let's just focus on a couple so we can make a quick decision. And so this is one of the hallmarks of groupthink. You don't consider all the possible alternatives here. So one of the things that they do is they engage in convergent thinking. We talked about this on the conformity lecture with Moscovici and Nemeth and those kinds of people. But the divergent thinker usually has the solution to the problem, but they don't want to listen to him. Why? Because he's not coming along with the group. He goes, no, let's go do something different. It's like, no, shut up. Everybody wants to do this. Okay, so they reject. One of my favorite examples is escape rooms. I don't know if you've done escape rooms, but they're so fun. When I first did it, I thought it was going to be so lame, but it was great. But as a group, everybody goes, no, look at this part over here. And everybody's looking at the wrong thing. And a lot of times you don't escape the room, like the Donner Party, because you're co-convincing each other of the wrong information. Okay, so the Bay of Pigs, we talked about this early on in the class. John F. Kennedy and his group decided, this highly insulated group, to invade Cuba because Fidel Castro, a communist, was down there. And it's like, we got this Cuban Missile Crisis going on. And what happens is we didn't do a good job. We made this quick decision. Quick decision had a few elements that he talks about. It's like, anybody that said something different, don't want to hear from you. Not all, every politician is kind of like this. I don't care which one you pick. People that have the information that is different than the group leader will just sit on it. That's self-censorship. So pretty soon we think everybody's unanimous. Oh yeah, we all do want to go eat there. And it's like, I'm sitting on my hands going, I hate that fucking restaurant. I don't want to go eat there, but I just won't say anything. So everybody goes, yeah, we're all in agreement, right? And then mind guards are people that have information that would educate the group on the issue, but they just sit on it. A lot of times with politicians, they have underlings that have information that they just don't want to tell, the superior, because otherwise he would change his mind. Okay, so some results. All the results are the same. You just don't look at all your alternatives. You get single-minded, myopic, which is, nearsighted. You just like a single focus as a group, and you make decisions. So get this thing about invulnerability, kind of I pick on America because we have that. It's like, we're invulnerable until 9/11, you know what I mean? But there was mind guards, that like within America, about it, and it kind of goes along with hive thing for your project. Everybody think the same. If you're a different bee, get out of here. We don't want to hear it, but the different bee is the one that has the solution. We talked about the deviance. In the Space Shuttle Challenger incident, they decided to launch it. Y'all are way too young to remember this, and it blew up, and an elementary school teacher, Christine McAuliffe, was on there, and everybody's like, oh my God, you blew up this lady. And it's like, NASA in 1986, they had warnings, but the superiors didn't want to hear the warnings. Furthermore, the executives only charged polled the management, and the engineers who actually know what they're doing, their information was never passed up. That's mind guarding, where you don't pass the information up to the top that would have prevented or halted the launching of the space shuttle. Now, the Titanic, same thing. Everybody's like, oh yeah, we can just sail through the night because it's so big and it's like, invincible. Vulnerability. Actually, if you look at some of the facts, there was 4 messages about icebergs. It's not from an iceberg. and they were failed to pass on to the captain, so that's mind guarding. The binoculars were asked for by the lookout person. He was ridiculed. That's rejection of the deviant. Then finally he says, oh, God himself cannot sink this ship. Invulnerability. And what happens? The ship sinks. Same thing in Pearl Harbor. If you think about this, they will live in infamy, 1941. Like December 7th, I was forgetting the exact day there. I was trying to catch it. But it's like several weeks before the attack, we knew that Japan was preparing an attack. But we're America. They're not going to come do anything to us. And so they lost radio contact. And military commanders said, no, we're not going to fly a few planes out there. All they had to do is fly 1 or 2 planes. And next thing you know, all these people were killed within Pearl Harbor. Vietnam, kind of the same thing. It's like we're invulnerable. We're America. We're this little bitty country. We're just going to go over there and whip ass. And next thing you know, we'll solve the conflict. And this has happened in a lot of wars. Think about the modern wars after 9/11, Afghanistan, and the wars, that we're currently Iraq, Iran, all this other nonsense that we get involved in. Usually I would talk about, weapons of mass destruction because that's what started this whole thing, but there was a lot of mind guarding thing too. Okay, so the third thing for this lecture, and then I'll do another lecture on 4, 5, and 6, is social facilitation. This is the easiest one of all. Okay, so I love this one. It's their fishing reel experiment. In intro class, I talk about this. So triplet have timed people and see how fast they can reel in a certain length of fishing line. So he would have them do it alone or in groups. And he noticed in groups they would do it a little bit faster. Duh, everybody knows this because it's competition. You have comparison. Alone, you don't know how fast to reel. You get competitive juices. So he focused in on anxieties, this competitive juices or energy we get when we do tasks in the presence of others. So in 1965, he says, when we get this energy, this competitive energy, it makes us do our dominant go-to response. It kind of reminds me of like when you're at the club, you go to your go-to move, you know what I mean, for dancing. And so when you get all jacked up on energy, you go to your dominant response. For simple tasks, that's correct. Complex tasks, that's not correct because the dominant response is going to be the wrong response. And so I use baseball as an example. Why? Because it's a hard task. The benchmark is 300. What does 300 mean? That if you're good in baseball, you fail 70% of the time. You only hit the ball 30% of the time if you're good. That makes it a hard task. So what they have done is they've followed people around throughout the baseball season. It's weird because opening day was supposed to be yesterday. And what they see as you get closer and closer to the series and the crowds get bigger and bigger and the stakes get bigger and bigger, people's batting averages fall. And I don't know if I have this information. I brought it in my other class, but I was showing the exact information in one of my classes. The batting averages fall even for good batters during the playoffs because the juices are a lot higher. And what's your go-to move? Strike out 70% of the time. Okay, so 2 additional sources of arousal. One is called distraction conflict. Like, not only are you nervous because you're competing or performing, but people are watching you and I always use video games as an example. I don't need an audience when I'm trying to do this really hard level of a game. Just get out of here. I want to do it all alone. The other source of arousal besides competition and distraction is evaluation apprehension. That means that I get worried about people judging me. Oh no, they're looking at me, they're thinking about me, what are they thinking? And so that makes me nervous too. So I have all these lines of, things, competition, distraction, evaluation that are making me nervous. Okay, so the last thing I want to say about this topic is this. Like when I'm going to see concerts or bands, like they don't wither on stage and go, oh my God, I'm so nervous because people are looking at me or judging me. They take that energy and they throw it right back onto the crowd like Rage Against the Machine or Jane's Addiction or Metallica or whatever you want to pick. And so Metallica, speaking of which, ride the lightning. And so they ride the lightning and they use it to their advantage and they do an even better job because of the energy energy of the crowd. And sometimes when I'm really on and lecturing really good, y'all give me the energy to do a better job and I ride the lightning. So I just want you to keep that in mind when you get butterflies or energy before a big game or a performance, for those of y'all that are athletes or musicians, etc., that it's like you use that energy to your advantage, just like some days when I get on that light and I can ride it really good. I hope that this lecture made sense. If you have any questions, give me a call or an email, and I will talk to you next time.